Simon Gatila was not like most boys in his neighborhood. He grew up in Katatura, a poor area in Windhoek, Namibia. The streets were dusty, the houses were small, and families struggled to make ends meet. But Simon always had something special curiosity. From the time he was very young, he wanted to know how things worked. While other kids played soccer in the street, Simon sat with broken radios and old cell phones, trying to open them and understand what was inside. His mother, Maria, worked hard selling vegetables by the roadside. She raised Simon and his two younger sisters by herself. They didn't have much money, but she always encouraged Simon to keep learning. She couldn't afford expensive books or gadgets, but she did give him one very important thing: belief. Believed in him even when others laughed. One day, when Simon was about 11 years old, he found an old phone in a pile of trash. It had no screen, no battery, and the back cover was missing. But Simon didn't care. He took it home like it was treasure. That night, he sat under the dim light bulb in their small living room, looking inside the phone. It was full of wires, chips, and small metal parts. He didn't understand what they all did, but he knew one day he would figure it out as he grew older. Simon's interest in electronics became stronger. He started fixing things for his neighbors' TV remotes, old radios, broken speakers. People began calling him the little engineer. He didn't mind. In fact, he loved it. Every time he made something work again, he smiled to himself. Had no training, just a love for discovery. Simon had one problem, though. His school didn't have a strong science program. There were no proper labs, and the computers were very old. The internet was slow or didn't work most of the time. Still, Simon didn't give up. He went to the public library after school and read whatever he could find. He wrote notes in a small blue notebook that he carried everywhere. It was full of drawings, ideas, and strange formulas he didn't fully understand yet. But he kept writing, hoping it would all make sense one day. Then something happened that changed everything. One day, while fixing a neighbor's old phone, Simon asked himself a question. Why do we need a SIM card to make a phone call? It was a simple question, but no one around him had ever thought about it. Everyone just accepted that phones need SIM cards. But Simon didn't like just accepting things. He wanted to know why. He went back to the library and started looking for answers. He learned about how mobile networks work, how SIM cards connect to towers, and how companies charge for calls. But he also found something very interesting information about Wi-Fi calling, mesh networks, and radio frequency communication. His eyes lit up. What if I can make a phone that doesn't need a SIM card, but still makes free calls? Thought from that day, Simon had a new mission. Started collecting parts, wires, batteries, old motherboards, and anything else he could find. He didn't have proper tools, so he used a small screwdriver set his uncle gave him, and sometimes even used a knife to open parts. It was hard, and many nights he stayed awake past midnight, working quietly while the rest of the house slept. At school, his classmates made fun of him. They laughed when he carried around a strange device made of old phone parts and wires. "What is that? A robot from a junkyard?" one boy said. Even some teachers told him to focus on real school subjects. But one teacher, Mr. Hamukoto, he saw something in Simon. He was a kind man who taught physics and often stayed late at school to help students. One afternoon, Mr. Hamukoto asked Simon to show him his strange device. Simon explained his idea and showed how he was trying to make calls without a SIM card. The teacher didn't fully understand it, but he saw Simon's passion. "You're onto something, Simon," he said. "Keep going." With Mr. Hamukoto's help, Simon got special permission to use the lab at a nearby technical college during hours. It wasn't fancy, but it had tools and parts Simon had never seen before. The first time, he felt like a real inventor. He worked harder than ever, reading more, testing ideas, and building new versions of his device. After several months, he finally created a working prototype. It was small, made from recycled plastic and metal. It had no SIM card slot, but when two of these phones were close to each other, they could connect through radio signals and make clear voice calls for free. It wasn't perfect, and the range was limited. But it worked. Simon was so excited that he entered the prototype in the National Student Tech Fair in Windhoek. He stood at a small booth with his device, his notebook, and a shy smile. At first, people just walked by. Some laughed, thinking it was just another homemade toy. But when Simon showed how the phone made a call without a SIM card, people stopped. They asked questions. A judge from the university couldn't believe what he saw. "This boy built this without training?" he asked. News began to spread. At the event, a German tourist named Marcus, who was visiting the fair, recorded a short video of Simon's demo and uploaded it to social media. He added a simple caption: "Namibian genius makes free calls without SIM cards. Must watch." Simon didn't know it at the time, but his life was about to change forever. That night, the video started getting shared. First by local Namibians, then by tech lovers across Africa, and finally by people all over the world. In just a few days, the video had millions of views. Then, something happened that shocked Simon, his family, and everyone at his school. Elon Musk. He wrote, "This is incredible. Pure innovation from the ground up. We must support this young mind." Simon stared at the screen in disbelief. His mother cried tears of joy. His classmates, who once made fun of him, now wanted to take selfies with him. His teacher, Mr. Hamakoto, was so proud he almost burst into tears, but Simon didn't care about fame. He just wanted one thing: to keep building, keep learning, and keep dreaming. And this was only the beginning. After Elon Musk shared Simon's video on Twitter, everything changed. Simon, the quiet boy from Katatura, suddenly became the center of attention. His phone rang nonstop. Reporters came to his school. News vans parked outside his home. People, who had never noticed him before now, wanted to shake his hand, take pictures with him, and hear his story. It was a lot to take in, but Simon stayed calm. Deep down, he knew the real work had only just begun. The video had reached millions of people in just a few days. Tech lovers, inventors, and engineers around the world were amazed. Some called him Africa's Elon Musk, while others called him the boy who broke the phone system. But Simon didn't want to break anything. He just wanted to make things better. Wanted to help people in places where communication was expensive or impossible. That same week, he received an email from a major TV station in South Africa. They wanted to fly him to Johannesburg for an interview. Simon had never been on a plane before. In fact, he had never even been outside Namibia. His mother was nervous but proud. "Go and make us proud, my son," she said, hugging him tightly. "But always stay humble." Simon's teacher, Mr. Hamakoto, helped him prepare. They practiced answers for interviews, read articles about communication technology, and talked about how to explain his invention in simple words. When Simon arrived in South Africa, cameras followed him at the airport. He smiled shyly, feeling a little nervous but excited too. During the interview, Simon spoke clearly and honestly. He explained how he built his SIM-less phone using old parts. He talked about how it worked using radio signals and how it could be useful in places with no mobile towers. The host asked him how he learned so much without formal training. Simon smiled and said, "Curiosity. I wanted to know how things work, so I kept learning." That one interview opened even more doors. Universities from the United States, Germany, and India offered him full scholarships. Some companies offered to hire him. Others wanted to buy his idea, but Simon was careful. He didn't want to sell his invention to the highest bidder. He wanted to build something that stayed in Africa and helped African people. He returned home with many decisions to make. His school gave him a hero's welcome. The government of Namibia even invited him to meet the president. They gave him an award for innovation and promised to support his future. It was an amazing moment. But Simon never let it go to his head. He kept visiting the same library. He still helped his neighbors fix broken radios. He still carried that little blue notebook full of ideas. One day, a group of engineers from Kenya reached out to Simon. They had seen his project and wanted to work with him to improve the device. They believed it could be developed into a new type of low-cost communication system for rural areas. Simon was excited. This was the kind of partnership he dreamed about, smart people working together to solve real problems. They began testing how to increase the phone's range. Simon's version worked well within 300 meters, but they wanted to stretch that to several kilometers. They also worked on adding more features like text messaging, voice storage, and even solar charging for areas with no electricity. Every improvement brought new challenges. Sometimes parts failed. Sometimes they had to start over. But Simon never gave up. He learned from every mistake. At the same time, Simon started getting strange messages. Some were from people who supported him, but others were from big companies warning him. "This idea will disrupt our industry," one message said. Another message said, "You should think carefully before continuing this project." At first, Simon didn't know what to do. He was just a student with a dream. Why were powerful? People trying to stop him? He spoke to Mr. Hamakoto, who told him, "When your idea is powerful, some people will fear it. But that means you are doing something important. Just be careful and don't sign anything without reading." Simon also received help from a group of African tech leaders who had built their own startups. They offered to mentor him, help him with patents, and protect his invention. Simon was grateful. He didn't know much about business or legal documents. But now, he had people guiding him. One of his mentors, a woman named Dr. Lindy, suggested he start his own company. "That way," she said, "you stay in control. You decide how your invention is used." Simon liked that idea. He thought of names for his company and finally chose one that meant something to him: Vulatech. Vula means open in several African languages, and Simon wanted his technology to be open, free, and for everyone. Vulatech started as a small group: Simon, a few engineers from Kenya, and some volunteers from Namibia. They worked out of a small rented space with second-hand equipment. But their passion was strong. They built more prototypes, tested them in villages, and kept improving the system. In one village called Okahanja, they gave 10 SIM-less phones. 2 families who had never made a phone call before. When a grandmother named Rosa used the phone to talk to her daughter for the first time in years, she cried, "I never thought I would hear her voice again," she said. Moments like that reminded Simon why he started this journey. Meanwhile, the world kept watching. Tech magazines wrote stories about him. University professors asked to study his invention. Even NASA engineers sent him an email saying they were impressed. But the biggest moment came when Simon received another surprise invitation, this time from Elon Musk himself. Elon invited Simon to California to visit SpaceX and Tesla. He wrote in the email, "You remind me of myself at your age. I'd like to meet you and talk about your work." Simon was stunned. He showed the email to his mother, who could hardly believe it. "You've come so far, my son," she whispered. From playing with broken radios to being noticed by one of the greatest inventors in the world. A few weeks later, Simon boarded a plane to the United States. He wore his favorite blue jacket, carried his blue notebook, and kept a small Namibian flag in his pocket. When he arrived at Tesla headquarters, Elon Musk greeted him with a smile. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I've heard a lot about you." They talked for hours. Elon asked about the SIM-less phone, about how Simon built it, and what his dreams were. Simon explained everything. He also shared his dream of building low-cost communication tools for Africa. Elon was impressed. "You have vision," he said. "You're doing this for the right reasons." Before Simon left, Elon gave him a toolkit used by Tesla engineers, and a note that read, "Keep building. The future needs minds like yours." Simon returned to Namibia, filled with even more energy. He shared everything he learned with his team at Vulatech. They began working harder than ever, planning to release a new version of the phone within a year. But Simon also remembered something very important. He was not doing this for fame, money, or awards. He was doing it for people like his mother, his teacher, and those families in remote villages who just wanted to hear the voice of someone they loved. And he was just getting started. Simon Gatila returned home from his trip to the United States with a heart full of dreams and a mind buzzing with new ideas. Meeting Elon Musk was like a spark to his soul. It reminded him that even the biggest goals could start from a small idea in a small home. He didn't let the excitement go to his head. Instead, he became even more focused. The first thing Simon did was gather his team at the small Vulatech office in Windhoek. He placed Ilan's gifted toolkit on the table and said, "This isn't just a gift. It's a reminder that we're building something big." His team nodded. These were people who believed in him not because of his fame, but because they saw his dedication and heart. Simon knew that the attention from the world had given them a rare opportunity, but they needed to act fast. The prototype he had built worked for short-range calls, but if they wanted to truly change the world, they had to make it work for longer distances and with more reliability. People living in distant areas, across mountains and deserts, needed to connect to, so they divided the tasks. Some team members worked on improving the hardware, others focused on software. A few worked on testing and collecting data from different regions in Namibia. Simon worked on everything coding, designing, testing, but he also spent time listening. He sat with villagers, students, old people, and young workers. He asked them what they needed, what problems they faced, and how they used phones in their daily lives. One afternoon, Simon visited a village where people had never seen a landline or a working cell tower. A man named Joseph who lived there. All his life, told Simon, we use smoke signals when there's a big problem. Sometimes we send someone on foot to the next village. That's how we share news. Simon listened quietly. Then he took out his prototype and made a free call between two houses in the village. Joseph's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I would see something like this in my life," he said. That moment stayed with Simon. It reminded him why he was doing all of this, not for fame, not for money, but to bring people together. Back in the city, things were moving fast. Now news agencies from around the world requested interviews. Popular YouTube channels featured him. One video titled "The Namibian Boy Who Shocked Elon Musk" got over 20 million views. Some called him the next Steve Jobs. Others said he was Africa's answer to Nikola Tesla. But Simon didn't pay much attention to the labels. One day he received an invitation to the Global Student Tech Summit in Germany. It was a major event where young inventors from all over the world came to show their projects. Simon was excited, but he had one condition. He told the organizers, "I'll attend only if I can bring 2 members from my team." I didn't do this alone. The organizers agreed, and soon Simon and his teammates Angela and David flew to Berlin. They presented their new version of the SIM-less phone, which now worked across 5 kilometers and could store voice messages. The judges were impressed. They asked tough questions, but Simon answered each one with clarity and passion. At the end of the summit, Volotech won the Most Impactful Invention Award. Simon gave a short speech saying innovation should not just be smart. It should also be kind. Technology must reach the last person in the last village. The applause was thunderous. Back in Namibia, something unexpected happened. A few large telecom companies began to speak out against Volotech. They argued that free calls would hurt their business. One official even claimed the device was too risky and unregulated. These companies had made money for years by charging high fees for calls, texts, and data. Now, Simon's idea threatened to change everything. Simon received emails warning him not to push further. He got calls from unknown numbers asking him to reconsider. One message read, "There are reasons why no one has done this before. Don't get in the way." His mother grew worried. She told him maybe you should slow down for a while. But Simon refused to stop. He said, "If we stop now, millions of people will stay disconnected forever." He spoke with legal experts who helped him protect his invention through patents. He also shared his work openly with universities, so even if something happened to him, the knowledge would not be lost. "They can't stop the idea," he said. "It belongs to everyone." Meanwhile, support for Simon kept growing. A famous African billionaire named Mr. Balawa reached out and invited Simon to his foundation's headquarters in Nigeria. When Simon arrived, Mr. Balawa said, "Your idea reminds me of why I started building businesses. Not just building a product, building a future." The billionaire offered to invest in Volotech, but Simon had one rule. No one can buy full control. This must stay affordable and open to the people who need it most. Mr. Balawa respected that and agreed to fund the next phase of development. With the new funds, Volotech expanded. They opened 2 more small labs, one in northern Namibia and another in Kenya. They also launched a program to train young students in electronics and innovation. Simon wanted others to have the chance he never had. In the lab, things kept improving. The phones became smaller, more efficient, and had better battery life. A new feature allowed emergency broadcasting, perfect for remote communities during storms, fires, or health outbreaks. Another feature helped farmers share weather updates and market prices without using the internet. Simon also worked with nonprofits to place these phones in refugee camps, war zones, and schools without internet. In one camp, a teacher used the phone to record and send voice lessons to children. This changed everything, she said. Now they can keep learning even when they are sick or unable to come to class. Back in Windhoek, a statue was made in Simon's honor, of him standing tall, but of a boy kneeling beside an open phone, tools in hand. Below it a line was written, "Curiosity is stronger than poverty." Simon visited the statue with his mother. She stood silently, then hugged him tightly. "You made our whole country proud," she said with tears in her eyes. But Simon wasn't done yet. He began designing the next version of the phone, one that could connect using satellite signals, so even the most isolated places in Africa could make calls. He also began writing a book to tell his story, hoping to inspire children in other parts of the world. "If I can do this from Katatura," he wrote, "so can you from wherever you are." Every evening, Simon returned to the same library that once opened the world to him. He sat by the window, looked outside at the setting sun, and smiled. Life had changed, but his heart hadn't. He was still the same boy who once opened a broken phone under a flickering light and asked, "What if?" Now the world was listening for his answer. Simon Gatila sat at his desk in the small Volatech office in Windhoek, looking at the sketches of his latest prototype. His eyes were tired, but his spirit was full of energy. It had been a long journey from fixing broken radios in Katatura to winning awards and shaking hands with world leaders. But Simon still felt like the same curious boy who had once opened an old phone just to see what was inside. Now, with more attention and support than ever, the pressure was also growing. He was no longer just a local inventor. He had become a symbol of hope for many young people across Africa. But with that hope came responsibility. Simon knew his invention was not just about technology. It was about access, equality, and lifting people who had been ignored for too long. The latest version of the SIM-less phone was being tested in more than 10 villages across Namibia and Kenya. The feedback was encouraging. People loved that they could speak to their families without needing airtime or a SIM card. Farmers used it to organize community meetings. Mothers used it to check on their children at school. Old friends spoke after years of silence. But not everyone was happy. Telecom companies in several African countries had started lobbying their governments to stop the expansion of Simon's device. They claimed it would hurt the economy and reduce tax earnings. In truth, many of them were afraid that free communication would threaten their profits. Simon received a letter from a lawyer representing one of the biggest telecom firms in southern Africa. The letter claimed that his phone violated certain communication laws and that using unlicensed radio frequencies was illegal. The tone was clear. "Stop what you're doing, or we'll take you to court." Simon didn't panic, but he also knew he had to be careful. He called his team and some advisors for an emergency meeting. "They're trying to block us," he said, "but we must find a way around this." A young woman from his legal team explained that there were international laws that protected inventions meant for humanitarian use. "If we work with the government and explain that this is not a commercial service, but a public innovation, we might have a chance," she said. Simon decided to act. He met with Namibia's Ministry of Communications and showed them real stories of people using the phone. A group of elders from a rural area even came with him. One of them said, "Thanks to this boy's phone, we didn't need to walk 5 kilometers to deliver news about a sick child." The officials listened. They agreed to review the laws. One official said, "What Simon has done is beyond what we've seen before. We must find a way to support it." At the same time, Simon spoke at a major African tech conference in Rwanda. He stood on the stage and shared how his idea was now helping thousands. "We're not just building phones, we're building bridges between people," he said. The audience stood and clapped for several minutes. That speech brought more attention. International organizations reached out, including the UN and several global nonprofits. They wanted to support Volotech by donating money, equipment, and even helping with research. Some wanted to test the phones in disaster areas, where communication was often the first thing to break down. But Simon had one condition. "You can support us," he said, "but you can't own us. Volotech belongs to the people who need it most." Back at home, Volotech was growing quickly. It hired more engineers, trained young people in coding and repair, and even opened a factory where young workers from poor backgrounds were trained to build and assemble the devices. For many, this was their first real job. One young man said, "I used to collect trash. Now I build something that changes lives." Simon believed in sharing knowledge. He released an open-source version of the phone's basic design online, so others could learn and build their own versions. Some people told him he was giving away too much. But Simon replied, "What good is a great idea if you keep it locked away?" As Volotech's name spread across continents, something incredible happened. A university in Switzerland invited Simon to deliver a guest lecture. It's not just to students, but to professors and researchers. As he walked into the large lecture hall, saw a gray-haired scientist sitting next to young students, all waiting to hear him speak. He began with a simple message: "Don't wait for perfect tools to start. Start with your curiosity." The room was silent. Everyone listened, and when he finished, the applause echoed through the hall. A professor walked up to him and said, "You've reminded us why we became scientists in the first place." Despite the growing fame, Simon never forgot his roots, still visited his mother every weekend. She cooked his favorite meals and reminded him to eat and rest. "The world may know your name," she often said, "but you'll always be my son from Katatura." Simon also kept in touch with his old teacher, Mr. Hamakoto. One afternoon, Simon surprised him by visiting his school and donating a full science lab. "Now, other kids won't have to imagine what a circuit board looks like. They'll see it and build it," he said. The school held a special assembly where the students cheered for Simon. Some even stood up and promised, "One day we'll make something too." But the journey wasn't always smooth. The pressure was real. Managing a growing company, facing legal threats, traveling across countries, and building new ideas was exhausting. Some nights, Simon stayed up late worrying if things would fall apart. During one of those nights, he opened his blue notebook, the same one he had used since he was a teenager. He flipped through pages full of messy drawings, scratched out formulas, and bold dreams. On the last page, he had written a sentence years ago: "One day this will connect the world." He smiled. "We're not done yet," he whispered. With support from the African Union, Simon and his team began a new project, connecting schools in remote areas using their phones. Students who had no internet or phone signal could now receive voice messages from teachers, join small group discussions, and even send simple replies. It was not the internet, but it was something, and for many, it meant they could finally learn like other kids. In a small village school in Zambia, a girl named Linda stood up during a test run. She held one of Simon's phones in her hand and said, "I want to be like him. I want to build something too." That, to Simon, was the biggest award of all. As Volotech reached new milestones, Simon kept looking forward. His next goal was even more ambitious: building a simple communication satellite that could support free calls from isolated locations across Africa. It sounded impossible. But then again, everything he had done once sounded impossible. He gathered his team and wrote a new phrase on the whiteboard: "If the network won't reach the people, we'll send the network to the people." Everyone clapped. The next chapter was already beginning. And just like before, Simon was ready to dream, big step by step, call by call, village by village. Simon Gatila stood on the balcony of his new research center overlooking the quiet hills outside Windhoek. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and gold. In his hands, he held the very first prototype of his simless phone, scratched, taped together, and filled with tiny wires. It had no screen and barely worked now, but to him, it was priceless. This was where it had all started. Over the years, Simon's life had changed in ways he never expected. What began as a simple question in a dusty room Why do phones need SIM cards? Had turned into a movement. His company, Volatech, was no longer just a small team. It had grown into a powerful network of thinkers, engineers, students, and dreamers across the continent. And yet Simon remained the same at heart. He still woke up early, took long walks to clear his mind, and carried that old blue notebook in his bag. It was worn out now with dog-eared pages and coffee stains. But it reminded him of everything, every challenge, every breakthrough, and every moment when he almost gave up but didn't. The latest version of the Volaphone, as the world now called it, had been launched just 3 weeks earlier. It looked sleek, used solar charging, and connected through a system of small, low-cost satellites. It could send voice messages, make calls across long distances, and even work in disaster zones. And the best part? It still didn't need a SIM card or credit. Countries from all over the world were now reaching out. A remote island in the Pacific wanted to use the phones for emergency communication during storms. A refugee camp in the Middle East asked for 500 devices to reconnect separated families. And a small school in the Amazon rainforest requested just 6 phones, so children could hear the voices of teachers who lived far away. Simon approved every request. "We didn't build this to make billions," he told his team. "We built it to bring people together." One day, Simon received a message from Elon Musk. They hadn't spoken in a while, but Elon had been quietly watching his journey. The message was simple: "Proud of you. Let me know when you're ready to build something even bigger." Simon smiled at the screen. He still remembered the day Elon had first tweeted his video. That tweet had changed his life. Now Simon didn't feel like a student anymore. Felt like a partner, someone who could lead, who could guide others the same way he had once been guided. He remembered a young girl named Linda from Zambia who once stood up with one of his phones and said she wanted to be like him. That moment had touched him deeply. Now Volatech had created a scholarship program named after Linda, giving full education support to young inventors in rural Africa. Each month, Simon personally called a new student to welcome them. He always said the same thing: "Your ideas matter. Don't let anyone tell you they don't." But the journey hadn't been easy. There were still obstacles. Some powerful companies tried to block their progress. One large telecom company even filed a lawsuit claiming that Volatech was hurting their business. Simon had to attend court hearings, give long interviews, and defend his work with honesty and patience. In the end, the truth won. A judge ruled that Volatech's work was not just legal, it was necessary. The court called it a human-focused invention that answered the needs of the forgotten. After the decision, people cheered outside the court. Simon hugged his mother tightly and whispered, "We did it." As time went on, Volatech's impact grew. In places where war, poverty, or geography had kept people apart, now voices could be heard. In a small hospital without internet, doctors used the phone to guide midwives during childbirth. In a village struck by floods, the phone helped coordinate rescue teams. Simon traveled to see some of these places. He always brought 2 things: a toolkit and that first old prototype. People asked why he carried a broken phone. He said, "Because this broken thing helped fix so many lives." One day, he was invited to speak at the United Nations. Leaders from around the world sat in front of him. Presidents, ministers, CEOs, all watching this young man from Namibia. Simon took a deep breath and said, "Technology should not only serve the rich, it should lift the poor." That's what we built. That's what we'll keep building. He ended his speech with a story. He told them about his mother walking miles to find vegetables to sell, about studying by candlelight, about the first time he saw a circuit board and thought it was a puzzle from space. There wasn't a sound in the room when he finished. Then, slowly, everyone stood and clapped. It was a standing ovation not just for Simon, but for every child who had ever been told that their dreams were too big. After the speech, a group of students from different countries came up to him. One girl from Brazil said, "You make me believe I can invent something too." A boy from Indonesia asked, "Can you teach us?" Simon smiled and replied, "That's exactly what I plan to do." Back in Windhoek, Simon opened the Volatech Innovation Academy, a free learning center for students who wanted to create real solutions for real problems. The academy didn't care about grades or test scores. It only cared about passion, ideas, and kindness. He placed his old phone and blue notebook in a glass case at the academy entrance. Underneath, a small sign read, "It started with a question." Now, people from around the world visited the academy. Volunteers from top universities came to teach. Local elders came to share wisdom. Children came to dream. Simon also launched a new project Skylink. The goal was to send small, floating balloons with radio transmitters over rural regions. These balloons could carry signals and allow people to connect even in the most hidden parts of Africa. At the project launch, a journalist asked, "Do you think you can connect every village?" Simon replied, "Not just every village, every voice." As he stood among the students and engineers, Simon felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced many challenges, but he never gave up. And now he wasn't alone. A generation of young inventors stood beside him, ready to build, ready to explore. That evening, Simon walked through the academy garden, where students were chatting, laughing, one on small gadgets under the stars. He looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, his small satellites floated in silence, carrying messages, hopes, and stories across the world. He didn't need applause. He didn't need awards. He had something better. He had changed lives. And as the wind gently moved through the trees, he whispered softly to himself, "We answered the call." 'Cause in the end, Simon's invention wasn't just about phones. It was about people. It was about possibility. It was about never giving up even when the world said you should. And that story was just the beginning.